On August 1st, 1981, MTV made its debut. The very first music video that played was Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. Clearly, they were making a statement with that choice. And yet, while it did signal an unprecedented change in how people listen to music, in some ways, things were the same as ever. One example is MTV's VJs, or video jockeys. While radios had DJs, music videos had VJs. And MTV had a lot of memorable VJs throughout the years. You had Kennedy, known for her iconic red hair and big glasses. Now she's a Fox News personality. I had to do a double take a few years ago when I was over at my mother's apartment where Fox News is on 24/7. I look and I'm like, Kennedy? There's no way that's the same Kennedy. But it is the same Kennedy. You had Simon Rex, who, like the Red Power Ranger, had a bunch of porn rumors going around. But his rumors were actually true. And then you got Matt Pinfield. Pinfield was awesome. He was always the one playing nu metal. And then he got that show Farm Club, which helped blow up bands like Chimera. Actually, now that I'm looking through his Wikipedia page, he also signed Crossfade and Coheed and Cambria. Yeah, Matt Pinfield's the man. So you're watching MTV all day and you're seeing all these VJs and you're like, damn, I wish I could do that. Well, in the spring of 1998, MTV gave you the chance in their Wanna Be a VJ contest. And the winner of this contest would go on to be probably the most notorious MTV VJ of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Jesse Camp. This video is sponsored by Raycon. This is one of my favorite times of year. Not just because, YouTube ad revenue is at its highest, but because the Christmas season is a fun time. But I always struggle to figure out what to get people. A good safe bet though is to look for something that people can use every day and also have multiple pairs of, like Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. And the newest model of Raycon's Everyday Earbuds is their best yet. I use them every day when I'm out for a walk, and they don't fall out even if I spastically shake my head for no reason. They now feature a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity. Lets you pair two devices at once. That means you can listen to twice as much music. There's also active noise cancellation, so if people just won't shut up, you don't gotta listen to them. And if you need to be aware of your surroundings, there's awareness mode. I also got this protective case cover. I picked this design because it makes me feel like I'm in a fancy bank from the 80s. It also has wireless charging capability. Just 10 minutes of charging gets you 90 minutes of battery. Go to buyraycon.com/wank to save big for the holidays. You'll get up to 25% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 25% off everything on Raycon's website if you go to buyraycon.com/wang. After MTV announced that there would be a contest to find their next VJ, over 4,000 people applied, and one of these thousands of people was an 18-year-old Jesse Camp. They were actually going to pass on Jesse until Don Jamieson, the future host of VH1's That Metal Show, stepped in. At the time, Don Jamieson worked for MTV, and he wound up convincing the rest of the staff that Jesse should make the cut. And with Don's influence, he would become one of the 10 finalists. The finalists were held in a hotel room during what Jesse described as a whirlwind experience. The winner would get a $25,000 one-year contract, which honestly sounds kind of low for such a high-profile role, even back then. But I guess that's how they get you. Oh, pay? You should be happy just to be here, contest winner. I wouldn't be surprised if someone floated the idea of not paying at all. But considering that Jesse was homeless at the time and used what little money he had left to come to New York, well, beggars can't be choosers. I'm sure he was happy to get paid anything at all. The contest was a multi-day affair, and over the course of it, Jesse seemed to be growing a little bit of a cult fan base. And the minute Jesse starts talking, you get it.
Hey, my name's Jesse, and I got some rock and roll for you now. I mean, this song really rocks. It's got great beats. In fact, the other day I saw these cats out on the street, and we got to talking, and we went out to a club, and then I saw this woman give the lead singer a rub. So if you want to know why this band's got it going on, I think it's because the lead singer's got a big-ass schlong.
Despite how much he seems like a total mess, he's got a ton of charisma, and he feels completely at home on the mic. Even when he's just sitting around in the background, he still manages to be the center of attention. So how did MTV pick a winner? Well, Carson Daly has an idea.
I hear they have a casting couch upstairs. Are you willing to go that far?
Hell no.
Alright, so with the casting couch at a play, I guess it's gonna be up to you, the viewer at home. You can cast your vote by phone, or you can do this brand new thing. Vote online. Just go to AOL. Keyword MTV. Some of you are probably like, what's a keyword? And I really do need to do an AOL episode, but to keep it short, AOL, aside from just being an internet provider, was also like a private internet within the internet. It had its own websites that you could only access on AOL, and instead of URLs, they had keywords. On April 20th of 1998, Jesse Camp would win Wanna Be a VJ over Dave Holmes. This has been called one of the most iconic moments in MTV history. But although Jesse clearly had his fans, the older fan base just didn't get it. People who've been watching MTV since the 80s or early 90s just didn't understand how a guy like him could get so many votes. To them, Jesse was basically the most annoying TV personality they'd ever seen in their lives. Like, the way a lot of you probably feel about certain TikTok celebrities, that's how people felt about Jesse. But this contest was one of the first times ever that the internet made the difference, and the kinds of people who liked Jesse were generally younger and more internet savvy. Shortly after the contest ended, a teenage user named Ugly Pig admitted to the Village Voice that he alone voted over 3,000 times for Jesse. And the article calls him a hacker, but really all he did was just make a script that votes over and over and over again. Like, if this kid's a hacker, Homer Simpson's a hacker. Why would Ugly Pig do this? He didn't seem like the typical MTV VJ, all corporate and shit, so I made him win. As some people saw it, Dave Holmes, who would ultimately go on to work for MTV much longer, was the guy MTV really wanted. So a vote for Jesse was basically a vote for Viacom to go fuck themselves. MTV, to their credit, unlike a lot of other times where companies did a poll and they didn't get the result they wanted and they just ignored it, did go with the actual polling results. In fact, when asked about the Ugly Pig situation, an MTV representative said they were aware that this was a possibility, and they let all the contestants know it was a possibility. Jesse Camp made his hosting debut that summer, and he was a natural fit for MTV. This man was an attraction. He fit right in with the fans who'd gather at Times Square for TRL. The network knew that they had something big in Jesse Camp, and they made the most of it. In addition to his TRL hosting duties, MTV gave him his own afternoon show, Lunch with Jesse. They also ran advertising campaigns around Jesse. Like one time Jesse Camp went missing, and then you have Sebastian Bach, you got Nu Metal era Vanilla Ice, and you got Wendy the Snapple Lady arguing over whether or not Jesse Camp is alive. His celebrity status was taking off, and there were even talks that MTV Films wanted to have him star in one of their movies. Jesse Camp just had this vibe that you never get from a professional TV host. He was all over the place to a point where Carson Daly compared working with him to being a traffic cop. He sounded and acted like he was high 24/7, and he would ask his interview questions like that time Chris Farley interviewed Paul McCartney.
You remember when you were with the Beatles? Yeah, sure. That was awesome.
If guests weren't particularly energetic or comfortable on character, Jesse could pull them into his energy and make things interesting. And when an artist vibed with Jesse from the start, it was good TV. Jesse has said that he had used his time at MTV to live out all of his rock and roll fantasies. Like in 1998, the MTV audience wasn't exactly dying to hear from Motley Crue, but Jesse loved them. He's going out to big events every night, he's partying, he's getting wasted, driving yacked up to Marilyn Manson shows. But as often happens, now that he's at the top of the world, the cracks start to show. In 1998, he was interviewed by Spin magazine and went into detail about his troubled upbringing. A real-life rag-to-riches story. Homeless and estranged from his parents with barely a cent to his name, and then all of a sudden his luck changes when he's a star on MTV. It's a real feel-good story, and the MTV audience could feel proud that they helped manifest that into existence. Then it all turned out to be a lie. Shortly after the Spin magazine interview, the TV show Extra busted Jesse Camp for faking his backstory. Or should we call him Josiah Camp? This segment is so brutal you'd think he was running for president. They found a guy that Jesse Camp went to camp with. They interviewed a wannabe VJ contestant who disputed the whole event's credibility.
He made this little plea on camera that, he was on the streets and he came with like his last few cents to New York City, and that kind of if he didn't get it, he was like begging the audience that, he was going to be on the street and homeless.
They even got some teens in Times Square to muster up a little outrage they could over this deception.
Not cool if he was lying, If that's not who he really is, then that's sad.
His mom was a vice principal, and his dad was less than pleased with this fabricated backstory, considering that he was the one who had been funding Jesse and his sister's lifestyle. He was faking an accent. He was pretending to be dumber than he actually was. Like, even at times he would pretend he couldn't read. Yet in reality, he can actually speak several languages. He was actually a good student who had been placed in private school, and he had a scholarship to attend UCLA drama once he graduated. But after graduating high school, he turned down his higher education commitments to travel the country with his sister. You can even see the two of them in an episode of the Dana Carvey Show.
Well, Dana, I just wanted to ask you if now that you're in New York, if you'd had a chance to meet your stalker yet. What the hell is on your head?
Although MTV executives were a bit worried when they learned all this, Dave Cerolnik, who was the one who came up with the contest, told the LA Times, he's on television, he's performing. And Jesse would later admit that he was more or less playing a character. That he basically saw what people were reacting positively to during the contest, so he played those aspects up. but then he had pigeonholed himself into being that forever. In any case, although this scandal would become a major piece of Jesse's lore, it really didn't affect his popularity that much, and MTV was very pleased with what they got out of him. So he would continue with his role at MTV. And then in April of 1999, as Jesse's initial contract was coming to an end, he would now shift his focus to his music career with a project called Jesse and the 8th Street Kids. This record was said to be a mix of a lot of Jesse's influences, which at the time was a lot of 80s hair metal and punk. And listening to the album now, a lot of it to me literally does sound like Sex Pistols meets Motley Crue. Was there actually a market for this kind of music in 1999? Publications were actually giving it decent reviews. The Dallas Morning News hated his Pauly Shore-like personality on TV, but admitted to finding him likable on the album. Entertainment Weekly said, "The good news about Jesse and the 8th Street Kids, relatively speaking, is that it's marginally easier to listen to Camp than to watch him." And AllMusic said, 19-year-old Camp is to be commended for staying true to the music on which he was raised. His actual fans were less kind. Was the music for the rockers he idolized, or preteen girls with lyrics like, "I'll fulfill all of your wishes with my big ol' sloppy kisses"? And I guess that's the struggle of staying true to yourself as an artist. Sometimes your fans just aren't going to get what they were hoping for. And considering how much Jesse's time on TV was subject to debate over the authenticity of his persona, it might be a bit surprising that he made a risky choice like that. But the thing about taking risks is a lot of the times it doesn't work out. And this album was a huge flop. In his opening week, he only sold 2,600 albums. Which, if that happened today, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But back then, when people actually bought albums and there were such high expectations for them, this was a disaster. In an interview for the website Linsanity, Jesse would reflect on the cold reception to his album. "They loved me for my comedy and my personality. So like, if we had put out Jesse Camp hair oil and Jesse Camp toothpaste, just Jesse Camp novelty type stuff, that probably would have done a whole lot better than like an actual record." He's also suggested that the album might have been more successful if they picked a different lead single. I only ever heard the single back in the day, I never listened to the album until now, but having listened to it now, I think he's right. I remember when that track came out, See You Around, they played the music video all the time. I hated that song. And now I listen to the album, and pretty much every other track is significantly better than that one. But I also think that might have been like the worst possible time to put out that kind of album. 10 years earlier or 10 years later and it might have worked. After the end of his initial contract, Jesse continued to make sporadic appearances on MTV. The first MTV VJ contest was such a hit that they did it 2 more times, but it never produced another cultural sensation like Jesse Camp. As Jesse's time at MTV was ending, Carson Daly was asked if he'd miss him. He got such a green light here. I mean, he could do anything he wanted and I lived through him. He runs 100% on passion and passion only, almost to a fault. And then he mostly just disappeared from the public eye. Every once in a while he'd pop up.
Oh, hi, what's up? How you doing?
Like there was a TMZ video going around in 2008 when Jesse Camp was trying to buy coke outside of an MTV party. Some people on posts of the video would comment that the whole thing looked staged, that he was purposely just trying to get attention to himself. And in a 2014 interview with Rolling Stone, he would corroborate this theory. He said that he saw the TMZ cameras and wanted to do something crazy to get their attention, and he had just mistakenly thought that it would be obvious to everyone that it wasn't real. After the TMZ incident, a Twitter account named Real Jesse Camp would start passing itself off as him. It played into the idea of him being a bitter ex-famous guy, unhinged and starting fights with Guitar Center employees, and it actually had a lot of people fooled. In fact, Donald Glover fell for this account and he mentioned it in a Vulture trivia video.
What lanky, spiky-haired space cadet won MTV's nationwide VJ search in 1998?
Oh, Jesse something.
I know. Jesse Camp. That's because I follow him on Twitter, because it's very sad.
Eventually, Jesse realized he had to put an end to this. It was fine if people were in on that it wasn't me, and it's some guy pretending to be me. But all of a sudden, it really kind of appeared like it was me tweeting these things, and I got pissed off. I was like, this is too much. So what was the real Jesse up to? Interestingly, despite the scandal where it was found out that he was faking his backstory, and despite him admitting that he was playing a character to some extent, the internet is littered with stories of people running into him in real life and saying that he's basically the same way he appeared on TV. I think what it is when you hear someone fake their backstory and they're playing a character, you picture the situation where like the door closes and he's like, ah yes, I'm not Jesse Camp, I am Josiah Camp III from Connecticut. But in reality, the character was who he is, just exaggerated a bit. He turned up the dial like 25%. And he'd mentioned in interviews that at times he struggled with finding the line between the character Jesse and the real guy Josiah. And I guess it's one of those situations where the longer you portray the guy, the more you become the guy. A 2009 article from Splice Today may give some insight into where that line was. The woman who wrote the article tells her tale of being a young woman who just moved to New York City. She became obsessed with Jesse Camp around the time he was putting out his first record. She actually didn't know who he was at the time, she just saw him around. And he was so visually striking, she just couldn't help but take notice. She describes him as tall, unattainable, and slightly autistic. She recalled seeing Jesse wandering around the East Village where she lived, and she'd often spot him by St. Mark's, which is exactly where you'd expect to find a guy like that at that time. Actually, this is such a tangent, but thinking of MTV and St. Mark's, this has been bothering me for like 2 decades. It had to be like 2002 when I'm by St. Mark's. I got spiky hair and I'm wearing a red slip-down work shirt from Blue Grape and I'm wearing Jenko rhinos. This photographer says they're working for MTV and they take a picture of me for an advertisement. And I give them my address, but I never get sent anything. And then, a little while after that, my barber, who I didn't tell about this, tells me he saw me in a magazine. So that picture, I know it was out there, but I've never seen it. Anyway, back to Jesse Camp. The author describes how she saw him in the time following TRL. Even before he left MTV, public opinion had turned sharply against him, and possibly in response, Jesse began to act and look more and more outlandish with each passing day. Soon, every sane person in the world was disgusted by him, and it was only me and a couple of open-mouthed 14-year-olds who still loved him. Maybe that's actually what I found so appealing. The way his whole wounded manner and awkward gait said, "If only someone would love me, I'd stop doing this." But then time passed and she began to be put off by him as all the things that she once found charming became more and more exaggerated. He was already a skinny guy, but he's becoming thinner and thinner. She sees him walking around chewing food and spitting it out, making it seem like he has some kind of eating disorder. He has this growing mass of bracelets that's slowly consuming his bony arm, and his hair is forming into matted neglect dreads. One day she catches him at a record store switching the price tags on records to scam the store. She doesn't work there, but she confronts him about it. This turns into a long conversation, and he talks a lot about the struggles of having your career peak at 19 years old. The following years would be a struggle for Jesse. He'd admit to dealing with drug problems throughout this time period, and whenever you saw him in the news, it would be some kind of legal problem. In 2015, Jesse had been traveling with his sister once again, now as photographers. While they were shooting in McDowell County, West Virginia, they wound up in an altercation that landed them in the news. A photography blog, Walk Your Camera, spoke to both sides of the argument. According to the camps, they spotted some kids playing with sticks in a driveway. They go up to the kids and they're like, "Hey, what are you having, a stick fight?" And the kids giggle a little and they leave. Then they stop at a gas station, and when they get back to their vehicle, there's a van blocking it. It was a woman named Jennifer Atkinson who thought they were taking pictures of her kids. An audio recording that his sister took has the woman saying, "Have you all looked at yourselves in the mirror? You don't look like upstanding citizens." And then she pulls a gun, and she demands they hand over their cameras. They're showing her the pictures on the camera, there's no kids on there. But while this is going on, an angry mob starts to form, like something out of Resident Evil 4. And then it turns into Rambo First Blood when the cops get there. They escort them away and they say that they should be taking ugly pictures of the people of West Virginia. And then another cop told them they're lucky they weren't shot. Jesse's sister Marisha was upset that it wasn't taken seriously by the police, but she reiterated that she loves West Virginia and doesn't like people pushing negative stereotypes of the region. Funny thinking about it though, like I've traveled the whole country several times over, and literally the only place I ever had a gun pulled on me was Virginia. When the blog asked for the other side's perspective, they said that people are on edge because of a recent case where a child disappeared and turned up dead. And they also said, well, they look like bums. In 2017, Jesse would get arrested. It was similar to the record store scam, but he pulled it at a Home Depot. Basically what he did was he got a leaf blower and he filled the box up with water bottles to try and match the weight, and then he tried to return and pass it off as the leaf blower. His mugshot was everywhere and he wound up having to pay a fine over it. Then in July of 2018, Jesse would make the news again when he disappeared. And this time they didn't have Vanilla Ice and Wendy the Snapple lady on the case. His sister, who he was clearly very close to, wasn't able to get in touch with him for days, and she was worried that something bad happened because he had recently been going through a bout of depression. Several outlets reported on this, and it picked up a lot of traction on social media. About a week later, the police were able to get a hold of him. After joking that he was abducted by aliens, he noted that nothing bad happened, and he was just having issues with his phone. But he was really moved that so many people were concerned about him. And it also seemed like he was turning things around a bit at this point. It's around this time that he also began appearing on the Hippie Dom YouTube channel. As far as I can tell, his first appearance on the channel is Street Rock with Jesse Camp, where he's at an event called Music Airs and he does quick street interviews with people like Steve-O. In the following years, they make similar videos at events like the American Music Awards and NAMM. And they also did comedy sketches.
Hi, my name is Jesse, and I'm the driver for Uber's brand new rideshare service, Uber Jalopy.
He's got interviews with bands like Crazy Town and Biohazard, and appearances on the Harmontown podcast and the Andy Dick Show. And actually, I'm glad I'm doing this video now, I've actually had the script for this mostly finished, and it's just been sitting on the back burner for a few months, and then I noticed 2 weeks before I shot this, he put out another video with Hippie Dom entitled Carrie Lake, A Journey to the Governor's Office.
Hey!
And it's probably the best produced thing he's done since MTV. It was shot in 2002 when Carrie Lake was running for governor of Arizona. Jesse, who's now rocking a gigantic Ox Baker mustache, is very much not a fan of her, and he interviews a bunch of people around one of her rallies. And as soon as he gets started interviewing people, you're like, oh, 25 years may have passed, but this is still the same Jesse Camp. He's doing these interviews like he never stopped. And while his personality could catch famous musicians off guard back in the day, now he's giving this treatment to regular people who are so far removed from that world that they have even less of an idea what to make of him. And it's good stuff. And even though he intensely disagrees with all of these people, he's still got that same personality where he just can't help but make them have fun with him. I have no idea if he even wants to make some kind of a comeback.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chad Kroeger of Nickelback!
Oh, brutal. You know, there's a reason I voted to get Dave Holmes to win the freaking DJ contest.
But if he did, there's definitely a lane for him there. But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, turn on notifications and check out my video about the Paris Hilton scandal. I'm out.
All I do is wait!